people in the room look and sound like you, that's not really collaboration.
In 1982, when I joined the Neonatal Research Network, and the PIs sit around a table, and the research nurses sit behind them. I mean, we had all that. And I looked around and I realized I was the only person who was not, blonde-haired and blue-eyed.
Every time someone rejected me, I took it personally. I thought I was hopeless. I thought this isn't going nowhere, and you've got to pick yourself up and try again. And when you start, you have got no credibility, no one rates you. I now realize 25 years, I'm just ahead of my time, right?
I've got a couple of jokes. One is that there's a fertility chair in the research fellow's office. In 9 months' time, and Susan will be saying, "What did you do, Lucy?" This is a talk from the heart. It's about lessons that I've learnt. Andy has been an amazing teacher and still is. And I would start by saying that everyone in this room has a place. So it was really heartening to see doctors, professors, nurses, finance people, IT people. That is how we work as a team. Welcome to those at the back. How do we all, this afternoon and going forward, ensure that everyone has that voice? So I'm going to talk. I thought hard about the brief I'd been given, and I wanted to think about 7 lessons that perhaps I could share in the sense that we are all learners and we're all teachers. And how might we do that? So the first thing that I've learned is to be curious. And I use this word on purpose. I really enjoy being scientifically curious. And having people who are particularly working at the coalface in clinical practice is one of the best places to start by being curious. And it goes back to anyone in this room might have that idea, that question on a ward round in the operating theatre that says, are we doing this right? Are we doing the right things? Could we do it differently? And so part of it is I love that curiosity. I love hearing challenge from medical students who ask me questions and don't take everything as accepted wisdom. When I trained as a student, it wasn't really like that. It was much more hierarchical. But there's an idea that rebel ideas are really good for moving forward our healthcare. Many years ago, when I was a PhD student, we measured some biomarkers, including this one, placental growth factor. And we saw this very striking picture that on the bottom line, placental growth factor is almost flat in women who go on to get preeclampsia, whereas in those with a normal pregnancy outcome, you can see the inverted U-curve. All of those years ago turned into a cohort study where we said, well, how does this biomarker compare to our other biomarkers that we use every day in clinical practice? How do we challenge that everyday clinical practice and say, is this a good enough test? And bench to bedside, campus to clinic, we did a randomized controlled trial led by Kate Duig. Andy and I choose to make our fellows ensure that they are the first authors on our papers, there's plenty of time for us to be last author. And on Monday at ISSHP, where Andy and I have come from, another fellow presented the follow-up trial, Parrot 2. So seeing that story through much of what I've done and underpinned by that scientific curiosity has been fantastic. My next lesson is to be challenging. So to go back, so that's what drives the curiosity. In intrahepatic cholestasis of pregnancy, we've commonly used ursodeoxycholic acid. There was a minimal evidence base. And so we challenged the status quo and said, well, does it work? And in fact, in this trial, we did a feasibility trial. And then in the main trial called Pitches, we showed that the impact of urso on the outcomes that had been taken as read, like itch or preterm birth outcomes, it wasn't borne out by the evidence. So really interesting to try and unpick that. But it also reminded me, you can see that I have a theme of doing drug trials and other trials in pregnancy about the equity for pregnant women, and it extends to neonatology because, of course, you're such an integral part of the team. So when COVID came along, some of us felt really strongly that pregnant women were yet again going to be at the back of the queue. And I became the national pregnancy lead for the recovery trial, which was the large trial in the UK that repeatedly put a lot of different drug combinations, drugs through testing. And in fact, when you looked at it, hydroxychloroquine, we've all used that in pregnancy. Lopinavir, ritonavir, we'd all use that in pregnancy. So that knee-jerk, let's leave the pregnant women behind, wasn't good enough. It happened in the vaccine trials, and we paid for it because it was much harder to get pregnant women to accept COVID vaccination. So this passion to include pregnant women in research and to challenge my colleagues when they say they're going to leave them behind should continue. But the other side of that is prepare to be challenged. And it comes back to that voice and ensuring that everyone does have a voice. And really to think about that challenge from a very multidisciplinary. I get that there's hierarchy for a reason, and in obstetric emergencies or lots of other times, there is reason for a hierarchy, but ask when in a scientific sense, we just want the brightest idea in the room. So prepare to be challenged and think about how we all enable those conversations. Being challenged also means putting our good ideas out for peer review and getting them rejected. So yes, in my CV, if you read it, you would think that I've just got a long list of grant acceptances. What you can't see is all the applications I've put in and got rejected. And the same with manuscripts. I've got a nice crop of Lancet papers. I've got some others that were rejected, and I've got some New England Journal rejections. But if you don't try, you won't get there. And so that my view is we really have to learn perseverance in academic life. We know that. But that challenge is always a good thing. This is what we show the juniors. There's that small sweet spot, which is where you put an application in and you get it funded. And actually, hopefully, now as a funder, I remember that from the other side. So my next one is to be collaborative. Now, I think when you're in a grant setting, when you're going for jobs, you're going for medical school or jobs or positions or grants, it feels like the only way to be is competitive. But I've learned that being collaborative with the right collaborators, with strong collaborators, is amazing. And that's when the best research and the best clinical care happens. And when I mean collaborative, I mean with a diverse group. If the only people in the room look and sound like you, that's not really collaboration. So that diversity that I see around the room today, and I know of it across many of our NIHR programs, embodies that collaboration. For me, collaboration is about trust. This is the trust equation. And I'll show you what's involved. Trust is credibility. Credibility is your words. Are you credible when you speak? But the next one is reliability. Are you reliable in your actions? Do you do what you say you're going to do? And the third one is intimacy. Is it a safe place to share ideas? Because if you're going to throw out good ideas and they get stolen and used elsewhere, you won't have that trust. On the bottom of the trust equation is the self-orientation. So we all have colleagues, and at times maybe us, where we're too self-oriented, too self-interested. That's on the inverse of the equation. So when you see that trust, Andy and I have it, we trust each other, great things happen. So you need to work at that. We need to build that trust. And the flip side of it is anti-role models. Role models are great. Anti-role models are powerful. They're people where when you're on the receiving end, you say, I don't want to be treated like that again. They shape our behavior very powerfully. So the anti-role models shouldn't be driving what we do, except to remind us not to treat others like that. But the best science happens in a positive research culture. It took me a while to realize this. I thought I just had to always go and collaborate with the shiny names. I learned that the good science doesn't happen like that. The good science happens with that trust, and hold on to that and value it when you see it and think about how you contribute positively to that. And the multidisciplinary groups that I work in, they inspire me. And so we do everything we can to have people from different disciplines. When I put grant applications together, I pretty much have one of each discipline. So occasionally I let a second obstetrician on the grant. But generally speaking, I do not deliver care in an obstetrician bubble. I deliver care with midwives, with primary care physicians, with nurses, with statisticians, with hypertensionologists. And so I try and recreate that in my research grant, because they're the people who are best placed to give advice. So whether it's in the UK, there are women and pregnant women and recently delivered women in our multidisciplinary group, because they are our co-applicants as well. And this was in Ndola with Andy when we were out there for one of our grants. And part of that is the concept that we hold ladders for each other and create ladders. This is a shout out to Sue Walker, who works in Melbourne, who runs, she sent this to me, it would have been last year, and she was running a seminar on who's holding your ladder. So we all want our ladders held for us. But if we want our ladders held, then the other side of it is whose ladder are you holding? So when you look around and we see a midwife who is starting out her career in research, what can I do to support that career? So ask whose ladders you can hold. You can be powerful ladder holders. And it really goes to this issue, which is there's a book called Fix the System, Not the Women. Because quite often it's easy to blame the women for stopping having a career in their mid-30s when they start to have babies. But what if we turned it on its head and said, why don't we do something to the system rather than asking to fix each individual woman? We have leaky pipelines and we just hemorrhage people from disciplines and genders out of that pipeline. How can we see it differently? What would it take to help fix that system? And NIHR is really strongly committed to that. So my fifth lesson is about being considerate to each other and how we all think about that. Considerate might be being considerate on authorship. It might be being considerate on grant applications. And it might be the wider concept of mentoring and sponsoring. Andy once told me, you can be over-mentored and under-sponsored. We all need mentors, to be clear, and I've had some really crucial ones in my career. But the idea of sponsoring is somebody who spots the opportunities and opens doors or points you in the direction of the door. This is Andy on Sunday, when surrounded by his team, our group here, because he didn't know I was going to say any of this, by the way, he's chosen to be that sponsor for so many people. It's not the research that we do, it's the legacy we leave behind where we are most powerful. So it's about that concept of mentoring and sponsoring that I think makes a difference. My reverse mentoring is a text sent to me by my teenage daughter. I applied for a job about a year before I got this one, and I didn't get it. And I tell that story because it's, again, on my CV, you won't see that job I applied for and didn't get. And she texted me across the room. So I always like wisdom from teenage daughters, I think goes down quite well generally for me. So it reminds me sometimes, yes, you won't get everything first time, but you pick yourself up and go back to that door and try again. My sixth lesson is similar, about being civil and just thinking about how we treat colleagues. So I am now broadly a civil servant, which is a new world for me. So I became Chief Scientific Advisor and Chief Exec of the NIHR, but I'm still a Professor of Obstetrics, a trialist and a consultant obstetrician, and I do that one day a week to be grounded. Because when you are sitting in antenatal clinic with the woman in front of you, you have to be present in the moment and you have to see her needs and listen to her hopes and her concerns. So I really enjoy that, but I have another life now as a civil servant. So I have to give evidence to the Select Committee and the Houses of Parliament alongside our Secretary of State and our Permanent Secretary. And sometimes I like to think that there are transferable skills, and I like to think that all that running around on the Labour ward serves me in good stead. My son decided he wanted to go on this, which is a high ropes course, which some of them are in the forests and some of them are standalone. I have never been so scared in the last 2 years as being on a high ropes course in quite a windy day, and the children were running around. And I just thought, this is what my job sometimes feels like. I'm being buffeted from all sides. I don't really know my way. And then it dawned on me, I was strapped on, so we were in harnesses. I did have more support than I realised, and I had a lot of encouragement from people around me who said, you can do it. So life is often a bit like a high ropes course, and with some surprises. But I've also, as part of being a civil servant, I don't know whether you can see this. So there's a politically aware, politically unaware axis on a y-axis, and on the x-axis, it's interested in others, interested in self. And these are the 4 quadrants. I like to try and be a wise owl some days, but some days I'm probably a dumb donkey and one of the other 2, the sly fox or the silly sheep. But we would all like to spend more of our time in the wise owl quadrant, I think, and we look for people who like to be there as well. And my last lesson is to try and be cheerful, and comes back to what I was saying about those collaborations. If we have laughed today in the meeting, not inappropriately, but if we find times to be cheerful, to be hopeful for the women we serve and the babies, and for the other healthcare professionals, it makes a big difference. This one always makes me cheerful because, as I say, sometimes people think that we have careers that look like on the left. Mine is much messier. Mine looks like the right most of the time. Many bits of my life look like that. And we try and create some semblance of order out of chaos. The other way I think of it is bumps in the road. So you think it's going to look like this, and anyone who's sort of at an early stages of your career, it's actually like the bottom one. And I've had some really tough times in my career. There was a time when they didn't have training numbers, and I had to go, and I didn't know what to do. I ended up doing a PhD, and that's why I'm standing here. I went to a different unit at one point for training, and it was really, really hard. It was tough. And by coming through that bump in the road, I learnt so much about myself. So although the bumps in the road are really hard when you're in the middle of them, they are phenomenally powerful in shaping us, hopefully for the better. And I think my guide that sort of runs through so much of this is this quote, which is a T.S. Eliot quote, which is about that exploring that we can all do. And if you think of the grants you're describing this afternoon, there should be that curiosity, that exploring sense of it, but exploring together. And sometimes we do come back and we see where we were, but with new eyes. And I think that's great. And the motivation that keeps me going is that striving to do the best for the women in our care. And I think that's such a guiding star, because when it's all bickering about authorship or whatever, that doesn't matter. This is what matters. And actually trying to do our bit to make a difference is very strong. So I'm just going to finish by saying I feel really strongly in NIHR that research is everyone's business. If we thought our health and care system was great and fixed and fine and all our outcomes were fantastic, we wouldn't need any research. But we all know it's not like that. For the women we care for the babies we see. So that's why research has to be core to care. It's not something you just do on a Wednesday afternoon in a different institute. It's something you do right here. And the more that we integrate research into everyday care, it's everybody's business. There is no one in the hospital for whom it couldn't play a part. And certainly across the NHS, we are really trying to get that message across. I think research and innovation can be part of the solution to the challenges that all of our health and care systems face. So rather than making it something that is only done by a very small number of people with lots of degrees, I want to do the opposite. I want to make it really accessible and really relevant to everyone. So what do I wish I'd known years ago? I think finding your passion is crucial. I'm very drawn to caring for pregnant women and then as a funder to making a difference. our strapline is to make a difference to the health and wealth of the nation. And through our global health research programme, that's now global. I think I've tried to take opportunities when they've come to me, or tried to look for the opportunities. And I think I've learnt to aim high. And actually, it's okay to fail. It's okay to pick yourself up and try again. Do not think that the people sitting with the professor title have just done it in one go. I can assure you they haven't. And I think I come back to the collaboration that we see today should be underpinned by that trust. We have to be kind and supportive to each other, but we have to have that ability to have those different ideas, those rebel ideas, and to manage that. I try hard to inspire others. I came to that unexpectedly. I didn't think I was a role model, but we all are, wherever position we're in. We are role models to others. But I love being inspired, and I'm fairly confident I'm going to be inspired by what I hear this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Lucy. So this session was really about the early career researchers, and we won't put you on the spot immediately, but it would be great if you can think up what questions you'd like to ask with everyone listening. No, they can. Well, we'll go. I suspect that some of you may have a pressing question, having just heard that talk. So if anyone would like to ask something of Lucy now while it's hot on the mind, please do. Stick up your hand, and we don't be shy. But what? Yes, please.
So Lucy, in this race of when you're an early career researcher, and you also have your responsibilities to start a family, and then at the same time you have to think, okay, but that's going to cause a break and a lag. You're going to lag behind somebody else in that research career. So then maybe we don't have that, like, we just can't do anything about it. But yeah, that intuition and that thinking is always there in the mind, that 2 years of your life, or maybe that 1 year, you're going to be behind. So
such a good question, and I get asked this. So I have 3 children. They're now teenagers. They're 17, 15 and 13. So I had 3 periods of maternity leave, and I worked part-time for 10 years. And it doesn't seem to have done me a huge amount of harm. It was really hard at the time because I saw exactly what you're describing. But these are life journeys. It's not just a single destination. When you're training as a medic or any other area, you think that becoming a consultant is the final destination. It isn't. And what I say to all our academics who are often taking time out for a PhD, for a lectureship, is that try and think about the journey in its entirety. So actually, Andy and I in our group, a very high number of our PhD students have maternity leave and work part-time. At the last count, 90% of our PhD students had gone on maternity leave. We have a slight joke in our group we've got a couple of jokes. One is that there's a fertility chair in the research fellows office, which seems to be true given the fertility rate of our group. So we have made it not just permitted, which is what I hear from others, but absolutely fine to come to our group and then find that you're pregnant, or it's welcomed. I know full well that there are professors who either overtly or covertly say that you have to have a Mirena coil in to do a PhD. I think that is unacceptable. I think it also leaves behind a big tranche of our talent. So it's both understanding the system and what we do to call out that, and then say also to talk to women and anyone at an early career stage and say it is possible, you just need it to help navigate. So for example, when our fellows go and get pregnant, we will support them to write the letter to the funder to say, please can we suspend? We write the letter to the institution saying you have an obligation to do the maternity leave pay. And then our other thing is that if you're in the middle of a trial, which some of our fellows do, it's actually quite convenient to have an extra 9 months. I don't tell the funder that, clearly, but there are many ways around this. And I would urge those who are in the room at any position to embrace academics having families. If everyone in this room left thinking that it's an enabler, not a barrier, think of what would happen. Think of the shift. And it's just about shifting the perception of it.
So I'm going to add to that, if you can forgive me as chairman, taking chairman's prerogative. That was actually one of the questions I was going to ask Lucy, because I think it's really important to us. I think it's kind of changed. Research is for everybody. I think that's the key thing. And dare I say it, but Lucy's been a real role model for the teams, because people go, this isn't for me, it's hard, I want to have my family, I want to have time out. And then you just say, well, look at Lucy, right? She's had her 3 kids and been unbelievably successful. It's quite hard to say someone isn't more successful. So I've now got to the point where people say, well, how am I going to have my 3 kids? I'm getting to the end of my PhD and I haven't had my 3rd one yet. It's almost like an expectation. But joking aside, it is not a barrier. I find that the women with their families manage their time unbelievably well and actually achieve a lot more than those that don't. And there are many advantages, not just challenges, with the approach. And it certainly doesn't actually detract at all from, who should and shouldn't go in. And we're not saying it isn't easy, but it's certain research genuinely is for everybody.
There is never the right time to have a baby. That's the other thing. So if you are, I'm just wondering whether we're going to be responsible for a wave of fertility in 9 months' time, and Susan will be saying, "What did you do, Lucy?" But truly, there are pros and cons of everyone. So make it right for you.
Just from a quality point of view, 4 of our last 5 PhD students have got outstanding PhD awards along with their 3 children. So they're like the top 1 or 2%. So it's not like, they're just suffering it and doing it badly. It's conversely, they're also stellar and doing really well. Right, has anyone else got a general question before we pick on these lovely new early career researchers?
It's not proper a question, but it's an observation that I've done. I come from, of course, a clinical background as a neonatal nurse within the unit. And as a junior nurse, I've never been introduced to research. It's something that came along with my experience. For example, once I started as an educator, and plus seeing my clinical experience, asking myself why we're doing this, why we're doing that. And it's nice, for example, when there are senior nurses that want to give answers, or doctors, of course, during the ward round. But I've seen how challenging it is sometimes in the clinical area, especially when we work with nurses that are old school, and it's about, we always done like that. It's always been done like that. And I found research very challenging in the clinical area, and I think that something should be done to push at least the junior nurses through this new chapter.
I didn't plant those questions. Yeah, when we were coming over in the taxi, I said, what are the 2 most important things we need to talk about are these 2 issues? And I was going to ask Lucy, I didn't have to.
So it's a very good point, and there's 2 parts to the answer. The first is that NIHR seeks to fund, as I outlined, with that the people who are delivering care should be the people on your grant application. So if you say to me, well, we can't find an academic nurse because so in that case, there are people out there who would like to make that step, who are asking those questions. So particularly, my applications can easily have a few professors on. You should be taking a punt and supporting, providing that first bridge, that first ladder for somebody at maybe earlier career level, and say that part of the grant is capacity building in an area that is underrepresented, like, for example, neonatal nursing. So we're never going to build that community unless we start somewhere. So it's about, then holding the ladder for the next person. The other part of it is let's get them young. So you didn't know this, but we are I don't even know if I'm allowed to announce it, but we are starting a program. We've had a program for undergraduate medical students to give them insight, and it's called Insight into Research. And we are now going to do the same for our undergraduate programs in the UK for nursing, midwives and allied health professionals, because otherwise you're playing catch up. So why can't we make the opportunities that we provide for medics the same for any other health and care discipline? So you are on the money because you've noted the gap. And if we have more ideas that start filtering like that, so I think what you've done is give yourself an action that you go and find a nursing school, either here or back home, and you go and give that lecture on why research matters. Because think of the transformative power. Think what you will do to 1 or 5 or 10 people in that audience if you bring your passion to it and say, this is part of my life. Could it be part of yours? And anyone who feels that we can, like you do, think about how you can be ambassadors to the next, it's not the next generation, but the next tier, the next tranche coming behind you. And one of the most exciting things about what we in this room can all do is to light that fire somewhere else.
And I'll just add to that. Lucy's pointing about the opportunity starting, but for the more senior people, and when you're deciding about your teams, it is an unbelievably rewarding thing to do. There are different funding opportunities and different subject areas. So I was in the taxi over, I was just thinking who on my team and our teams are in this space, and there's huge numbers. 1 PhD student, 2 postdocs, 1 senior lecturer doing research in vaginal breech delivery, teenage mentoring schemes, rolling out services on preterm birth service. They've led a whole bunch of stuff, writing their own grants, and it's incredibly successful. And that's not even considering the huge delivery teams, who are all, allied health professionals like nurses, midwives, and some of them will come and join in the sort of creative side, and some will major in the delivery side, and it's been a huge success. And I think what we're hearing from Lucy is that if you do that, you will improve your chances of funding. That diversity she mentioned is a critical part of this. Can I ask you guys, because this is here, are there specific questions you would like to ask Lucy while you've got her here, or anything else? And if you can't think of specific questions, maybe you can share, the best things and worst things about trying to make it in this world with the rest.
And a question is, what could NIHR as a funder of global health research do more of or do less of that would make a difference to you? What do you think I need to know that I'm only going to hear from this group? Because the reason I come out and about is to hear things that I won't hear back in London. So you are crucial for you can tell me about the things that go well that you want me to do more of. I am specifically interested in the do I know. So when I was in Malawi last year, if you really want to know, I had the early career researchers in a room and I threw all the professors out, but I won't do that today. And they told me about, for example, how sometimes they had bright ideas and they wanted to know how to pursue those bright ideas, navigating within a PhD. So it was just one example. I had lots of things that I won't hear in London. So please ask or tell me about things that you want me to hear.
There's a little target group here. Yeah, go on, please. Hey. Go on.
So it's been burning in my head for a while, not necessarily related to what you just said. I'm not a medical clinical professional. I'm a social scientist.
We ought to talk about non-medics.
Very proudly so. And I completed my postgraduate studies in 2010. Right after that, I've been interested in maternal and child health. And without any training, I found myself working in this line, working on the grassroots in different parts of India. But I found it difficult to find my space. And now I'm doing a PhD with Sidhan and Tina Lavender at Imperial. Very happy doing what I'm doing. But I sometimes struggle to understand where I am going and where is the space for me in this line.
So that's such a good question. You're the social scientist that Sudin and Tina have found, but we all need a social scientist in our life to ask, why does an intervention work? How does it work? How do we get the richness from the data methods that you might use that I'm not going to get from a straight A versus B randomized controlled trial? So you provide much of it, and it's the same could be true for many others. What is your contribution to that research question, where you will bring light to that understanding? And I've worked with social scientists across a lot of my work, and really love the richness that it brings to the sort of to the plain numbers. And in answer to your where is your space, you might need to create your space, and I suspect you have already. And then there's that twofold: how do you grow other social scientists around you? So how do you find, this is a challenge to Katie, who's from the Department of Health and Social Care and works with me in the Global Health Research Programme. So what can we do to grow the network of social scientists across global health research? So where do you find others like you? Because sometimes we need to sit in our own tribe, and then sometimes as a social scientist you actively need to build bridges with others. Katie, do you think there are opportunities to grow those collaboration networks? Can you think of ways that the Global Health Research Programme could do that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've seen it happen already across other disciplines. So why not social research? And reach out to us, because we can help connect you with others, is what I would say.
So we have this ridiculous, we call it GDPR, the information governance around sharing emails, which has meant that we cannot send you a list of email addresses, but we've got imaginative ways around that to say, how do we, to put a call out to say, calling all social scientists across global health. But as I say, you are going to forge a path. Do not underestimate what you are doing and how you then, both with sort of vertical and horizontal networking, you find your place.
I don't think you need to worry. I think you're probably much more important than you think you are. Because once you've got this experience, the qualifications you are in, you're going to be highly sought after, I suspect. It's my impression. So, and the very first thing Lucy said was, don't start with, I'm not something. I'm this person you need. Yeah, and I'm sure you will be, really.
Yeah, so I'm a second year PhD student, and presently working to develop some of my mentoring skills with my fellow team members. So I would like to know, you have mentioned about Andy role model in your presentation. Andy role model? Yeah, so I would like to know more about that.
Well, the difficult questions are starting. So the anti-role models, I can think of a few. So when I moved to a new unit, it was really hard because a couple of people were making my life really quite tricky. I didn't know what my contribution to it was or what theirs was. It turned out a year in that there was a concerted effort to be unfriendly. And I remembered from that when new people come into our unit, we all need to go the extra mile to encourage them and to realise what it's going to be like for them coming in. It's very easy for us to say we don't do it that way. We've always done it. What you were saying, we've always done it like that. We can all do that. I went and had some coaching because I did not know how to deal with this. It was really unpleasant. And one of the things I learnt that has stayed with me ever since is it's the rule of thirds. So in a situation which isn't going well, it's 1/3 my contribution it's 1/3 the other person's contribution, and it's 1/3 the context. I need to own my behaviour. So I need to choose how I can contribute to this less than great situation, and I can help the context. I can switch a rota so that I can, do something about shifts or whatever, but I can't control their behaviour. So it taught me, and the coach gave me some really good tips. So rather than avoiding the person, the senior who was being fairly unpleasant, I used to go and ask them for advice. And he was completely wrong-footed because I'd been trying to duck them, and all of a sudden I switched it because he did have knowledge and expertise. So it was about being in control of that situation, and then remembering, don't do that to others. So when I then moved and went back to a unit and we had new people in, it was really powerful to say, think about the messages that we send. I could name some other anti-role models, but reflect on the anti-role models in all of our lives and say, what do we take from them? So rather than in a sort of a doom loop and a spiral down, say, I've got through that. What do I learn to do differently as a result?
Yeah, and just say, don't hide things. I think talk and share it, because we all have challenges. And Lucy and I, because I knock on her door every week and say, what am I going to do here, and you share stuff.
Thank you. My question is, so there was one slide which you showed that the research that we want to do and the research that gets funded, and a very thin intersection. So what can we do to really increase that? As an early career researcher, what is our chances?
So you can increase your chances, but the other thing that I've learnt is to lean in to the funded research. So in 2010, I was a youngster, and Andy and I were co-applicants. Andy let me lead, and he was my insurance policy. And it was a commissioned call. So we put out, we want to do this research. And I thought, oh, yeah, right. It was in the research that could get funded. It's turned out to be one of the best studies I've done. I got more and more involved in shaping it, in caring about it, in seeing it from the women's point of view. And it's our Phoenix trial, which looked at timing of delivery for women with preeclampsia between 34 and 37 weeks. And we got 2 other spin-off studies. What's really, really interesting is that was done in the UK. We had maternal morbidity and we had no baby deaths. Off the back of that, Andy and the team, we've applied for money to MRC and got funded to do the same trial in India and Zambia. And what was completely astonishing is that we reduced antepartum stillbirths from 10 to 0. So just think about the difference that's making. And it was published a few weeks ago, couple of months ago in The Lancet. And so that journey has been from that bit of the graph, that research that got funded but I hadn't planned to do, and that will shape lives. Andy, do you want to talk about sort of what that second trial's meant?
Yeah, I mean, I think your question is, the bottom line is you have to do something that someone wants. And sometimes there's this really thing but to be fair, people want things that matter. So there's a reason why there's a small sweet spot. And you have to concentrate. But then if you do work, as Lucy's saying, in an area that's important, and preeclampsia and mothers and babies dying does matter, it gets funded, and then the offshoots are then fantastic. And then you then can expand, you build on your success, your credit, that sort of success thing, the credibility side, and then you can get more funding. So it sort of escalates. If you go off in a very small niche area that nobody cares about, or particularly that women don't want or don't care about, because that's where the social science comes in, you're sort of wasting your time, but for good reasons. Funders will fund things that matter. And the other side, if there are things you want to do, but you're ahead of your time, where you've got such a passion, you can still do them. Because when you have big teams and big opportunities, you know, you can get your students, undergraduates, other people in, and they can do those side projects that often pump prime. And many of our initial ideas started from those small seeds.
Yeah, well, sorry for learning. So I was just wondering, I've been working with Sudhin for the last 10, 15 years, and we've seen a lot of NIHR funding on the global health make a great difference in so many areas and things. But we always found there is logistical problems whenever we transfer funds from UK to India for various aspects of the research. I always ask Sudhin this question. I don't know whether he's in the process of discussing with you or anything like that. Is there any plan for NIHR to build a NIHR Global Health Unit to go into those countries and set up local logistics and funding to make it much more streamlined and work can be much more easier?
So there's two aspects to that. One is as a funder, and then one is with research teams. So as a funder, we can and do have partnerships, but that doesn't remove all the bureaucracy. In fact, as some people know, NIHR does like its bureaucracy. I'm well aware of that. But the bureaucracy with funders in India is not radically different. Some will tell me that it's radically not, it is even more complicated. So even if we had partnerships with in-country funders, that doesn't take away the challenge. The next bit of it is capacity building, finance management, R&D officers, infrastructure in country, particularly on a reasonably sustainable basis. Because we were talking about this, I was talking to Katie earlier, we do have to build in what we call assurance, which is that we're not just writing blank checks, but we also have to get that right. And I think it's harder than it looks. And we were laughing about the emails that we get sent as an investigator, where it says you are 3 pence out, please resubmit, which like does my head in. And then I on the other side as a funder, which is like, well, why are we doing it to this extent? So the question is, what's the gap or the problem, and what's the solution? And for me, probably a key solution is by doing not only capacity building for researchers, but all the related disciplines, where all the aspects of it that you need to make a research grant fly. If you think you've spotted opportunities that we haven't, please keep saying so. But as I say, even if we had an in-country team, we can't have an in-country team for 196 countries or 190. But it's a question of what do we do, and then what do all of you do? I learned a long time ago to go and make friends with our R&D office. Andy more senior than me, but we both held roles in our R&D teams. So if you don't like the bureaucracy, how do you become part of the solution to tackle it? And sometimes that means getting involved in the R&D administration, but actually you learn lots, and you're doing your bit for the system.
I was going to say, to be fair on the NIHR, speaking as an investigator, they're really keen on capacity building. And if you ask for things that you think are needed, then you'll often get them. So in my group in Sierra Leone, we knew the finance management would be a challenge for the local university. So we asked for £50,000 for our finance people to support their finance people, and we got it. So it has to come from you. You know what's needed, but I think these guys will be all ears. Yeah. But there was if someone else, yeah, here, we got one here, and we got...
Hi, I'm a PhD student at Imperial College London. So I'm a nurse. So I was just listening to Mariana's comment about how clinical nurses don't always have that pathway, set path to transition into research. So this was again discussed in the NIHR training forums, and it's really heartening to know that it's becoming formalized. So I was wondering, do you have anything in mind to bring it to the more global health context? Because although I am a nurse, my transition to research would not have happened had I not done an MPH. So I basically had to take another path and then come back into research. I mean, I could not have done it from being a nurse and then directly into research. So
NIHR was born in 2006, and the Global Health Research Programme was born in 2016, wasn't it? So I was about to say we're 6, but we're 7 years old at the moment. And it's gone from a standing start to what it is now. And the capacity building part of it has always been baked in right from the beginning. So there are the opportunities, but we are not as mature, particularly in that making the transition. So, for example, in our domestic, we've got things like the PCAF, which is the pre-doctoral. It's the scheme for what you're describing. I'm trying to think what the name is. That's too many acronyms. And so we've got those sort of bridging schemes much better in our domestic. We have been talking about, and I think in my inbox is a paper that I need to give comments on about exactly what you're describing. So it is definitely noticed, and as to how we enable those transitions. I'll be open, there are some difficult conversations to have in a global health research for a global health research strategy, because we can't. Do we spread the jam very thinly across everything and everyone and everywhere? The good news is that India is a completely key partner, because for all the many reasons of alignment and need, and they are going to stay as really strong collaborators. But we also have to take a view of who and when do we support. So, for example, we want to make sure we have not got big gaps in our career development, because we've heard that. So there's some other plans to look at the pull through, particularly at, say, for example, postdoctoral stage. It can be really hard. So it's not good enough to just double our number of PhD schemes, but keep our postdoctoral at the same level, because we've invested in all those PhD students, where do they go? So we're trying to think about the sort of the offer all the way through. Katie, do you want to add to that?
No, I think you've covered it all, but it's something that I've written down listening to the conversations today. Is there more that we could do to support nurse researchers, allied health professionals, capacity building? So yeah, it's something that I've written down.
Thanks. And don't be shy in being that visible face and voice, and making sure you advocate and champion what you're doing.
So thanks. It's been very inspiring. So I'm a kind of a senior career researcher, and we've been part of several projects that have been funded by the GCRF or the MRC. And I think there are two problems that we face with our early career researchers. One, they get really well trained, and then there is really not much that they can do sometimes. And then you have people, they get very well trained and they leave for better opportunities abroad. And I was wondering, you all have funded so many wonderful programs, and I see so many students here, and I think you get the capacity building so well and the mentoring so well. Is there some platform where we could all kind of know? Because I'm very sure if a PhD has been trained on this project, I'm a neurologist, I work on brain health, and I'm sure they would all bring such value to the work that we do as adult neurologists or as public health specialists. So is there a platform where we could just look at, where are these people afterwards? Are they looking for places? We are looking for people. And so is there I did a Commonwealth fellowship.
I love this idea.
Yeah.
I did say, let's have new ideas. It's brilliant, Katie. I mean, what would it look like? It would look like people who are funded by NIHR Global Health Research, opting in or opting out, depending on which model you use, to post who they are, what they're doing, what their skill set is. I'd want to. Does any of that? Does that exist in other places? Is anyone aware of that sort? It's like a community of practice, isn't it? And it's about building that community and people feeling part of it. So if you're a pediatric neurologist, a dementia specialist, and you're hanging out with all these neonatologists, I think that's... So I think it's about... we've got work in our global health research programs on dementia. So how do you find each other, and what would that be? It needs some digital infrastructure. I think it's a very exciting idea. And what do you think? Katie's thinking, what has Lucy signed up?
No, I wanted to share something. I think post-COVID, we've been starting to think more, how could we create this community of practice? For a while, we thought, what can we do in person? But I think the reality is to bring large numbers in all the different countries that we work in together, it will have to be virtual. And what we started to put into train is what we're calling a shared learning event series. And I'm not sure if some of you have already heard, I think the first one is happening in November, but there'll be a whole series. And really the aim of these is to bring together researchers from across all of our programs to network in a virtual space. There'll be kind of presentations and talks. So it's a start. So it could be a start somewhere. So look out for more information on our shared learning event series.
But I think if we could grow from that into a forum or a platform where we could share. The other thing is if we did clever coding, so our NIHR funding and awards page has got people on, but it's got them listed. It doesn't say that somebody's a neurologist or something. So some ideas. We are investing in our digital infrastructure, and there's something about this that I think is important.
I must say that this effect has happened because of, and now I know why Sudhin asked me to come here. We met at a conference and we had talks one after the other, and he invited me. I think this is the culture that is actually already spreading.
And it also goes back to, that curiosity about making those links and seeing things from another person's perspective. So, have we got all the right people in the room? And if not, how would we go and find them?
Hi, thank you for the very inspiring talk. My name is Vaishak, and I'm a pediatrician, and currently I'm doing a PhD at Imperial. I would like to talk from a clinician's perspective coming from LMIC. So I was quite lucky to get exposed to this NIHR group, and luckily got the funding and the opportunity to do a PhD. But generally in India, the clinicians, they go, they're fully clinical focused, and there are not much exposure to research, and such opportunities are few and far. And like Prof Suvarna said, she's looking out for such people, but the institutes of NIMHANS caliber are very few in this country. So right now I'm just finishing my PhD. So the question that I have is that at a postdoctoral level, or a much senior level, to be an independent researcher, how can NIHR support people like me, having to stay in this country?
I'm going to start by asking Andy about his experiences in here, Zambia, Sierra Leone. Andy, you didn't think I was going to turn questions on you, did you? What have you learned about what is most impactful for those, particularly at the postdoctoral level, across the countries you've worked in?
So my impression is that there's a lot of, you guys work in the most challenging parts of the world, and there's this paradox of low sort of needing help. When we were talking over lunch, it was, what do you need? You need people, right? And the place where the opportunity for research is most rich is the place where you don't have people, because you've got such pressure on your service, and that's a sort of opportunity missed, I think. So I feel that one great thing about listening to Lucy is that when you listen to her talk, you think, gosh, I could do that. Whereas people think of academics in kind of ivory towers, and it's for someone else who's clever or whatever, some different type of animal. But I do believe there's a budding researcher in all of us, in everyone. And in a way, it's like building up, making it the norm, not just I'm going to step out and do it. It's part of your everyday activity, and you can incorporate it into your whatever you do. The curious side, the first lesson there, and at a different level, even if it's just facilitating the delivery for other people, it can be for everybody. So the first thing to say is, when we've gone out into other parts of the world, there is and done big capacity building exercises, the people who turn up are not just people like you, but everybody. And we have taken people who have all sorts of interests and not even clinical interests. They've come in as data collectors. We've given them masters. They suddenly realize that there's something that it's in it for them. And then you open the door about funding opportunities. And actually, there are lots of people who are really willing to fund people from this parts of the world. And I think the fact that NIHR has put so much effort into this space and continues to do so while everyone else is plummeting, I think is a real lesson that this is something to nurture. So you have to keep an eye out from it. But my point, I think, is that it is for everybody. And if you get the masses coming up, there will also be the opportunities. But incorporate it in your jobs. At a very high level, you need to say, in the NHS, it is core business for every single clinician to be involved in research. It's not just for the academics. I know if you want to become a hot-headed professor, you're going to have to work hard, get the grants, and find the fellowships. But on the other side, I think all your colleagues who just think research is for someone else ought to take part in it, I think.
I think Andy said so many helpful things. So it's a question of what can the funder do, and that's about us career development schemes and making sure that there's opportunities. And as I say, actually the postdoctoral space is one we've identified that we want to bolster. The second thing is, what can you do? And that sort of comes back to something I sort of touched on, which was my career's had many zigzags. So sometimes it isn't going to be a straight line, and sometimes an opportunity comes up and you slightly think, is it in that very tiny bit in the middle? Probably not, but does it open doors? It certainly does. So, for example, I wasn't planning to work in cholestasis of pregnancy. It's not my main area, but I learned to do drug trials properly, partly through that. And then that got me interested in equity for drug trials more broadly. So sometimes opportunities come not from the door that's right in front of you that seems a bit closed, but from the others. The third thing is something that I think all of us can learn, which is what I call show me the impact. So we all need to land the importance of what we're doing, and what you're describing of research not being entrenched in the culture. That is the job that we can all do by making it's not enough to get your paper published in the Lancet. It's what happens next. So it's how do you get the findings of your research into policy, practice and guidelines. And all too often we stop because we're so happy to get our paper published that we think the next bit isn't for us. We need to turn that on our head. Next time you're designing something, a trial or a study or whatever it is, ask what would you do with the results and who do you need to engage at the start of it in order to have that impact. Because the more that we go and shout about the impact to the clinical service, to the women, to the families, the more you will win your battle on does it matter. It so matters, and that impact, that pathway to impact, is something we can all do more effectively.
I'll add to what Lucy says. I know you're sort of thinking, what next? And there's no opportunities. I get a phone call every week asking for up-and-coming, budding people like you from your environments. And I struggle to fill those opportunities. So I think they're there. Yeah, I think they're there. And you need this person next to you for the next steps, because it's a space that I'm only just moving into now, like policy labs and having impact and so on. But I really think for you guys sitting around the table here, the world's your oyster, and there are such opportunity. You are kind of trailblazing, and there are problems, but the mere fact that you've got Lucy here, Katie willing to come and listen, take notes, I think is a sign of something new and the beginning of something.
Hi, my name is Constance. I'm doing a PhD at Imperial in gene expression, so I'm also not clinically trained, but I did. But before that, I did a master's in translational medicine, also at Imperial, and we were taught a lot by the NIHR. We had a clinical research module, but actually a very small proportion of my course was clinicians or nurses. Somehow, all the scientists go into the private sector after, and I was wondering, do you also do like those kinds of teaching from the NIHR also into like maybe social science or nursing, like at a very low like undergrad level or something?
So it's funny because last week I was at the NIHR Academy, which is our sort of main capacity building, and they were saying, could I go and speak at undergrad geography and engineering? I was like, well, I know that we want some geographers and some engineers, but I'm not quite sure I can take on, the world. It's a good point, and actually what we need is an organic network. And so it's a question of not just a top down, but a bottom up. So, and quite often you're a very powerful voice if you go back to your undergrad, to your master's course and say, look at me. If you can see it, you can be it. And so the best ambassadors are the people at all stages, particularly because people often want to see somebody 1 or 2 or 3 stages, not 10 stages. So I can talk, and there's what I do and it's useful, but actually often what has the impact in reaching people is much more immediate and sort of more buddying schemes that enable that reach. So do not underestimate your power in being able to offer, go and offer to talk and make it real for them and say, this is what my job looks like. This is why it's great. These are the challenges. And if we all become ambassadors for that, we will be way more effective than one person trying to do it. I can do change at a sort of very high strategy level, but we'll make a difference more by getting our message across, very much as everyone's talked about. How do we go further faster? And it's all of the above.
Actually, this was regarding the point which Pallavi was saying about nurses and research in India. So I am also a nurse. So in India, actually, if we want to progress our career in research, we have to either go abroad for advancing our skills or otherwise take any other disciplines like public health, or I have done a master in social work. Okay, so I'm just wondering if we can have some opportunities for our clinical nurses to involve in research, because there are many who are having a lot of commitments here, that their family is here, so they cannot go abroad. So if we can integrate the research into the clinical practice.
So all of the people who introduce themselves as neonatal nurse researchers, that is one of the key routes. So by getting involved, so one of the routes is research delivery, because it's what we might call try before you buy on both sides, that you work out whether you love doing the research delivery part or whether you want to take a stepping stone into being a researcher yourself. Both are equally valuable. There is, forget the hierarchy of all of this. So those opportunities come from many places. And I think one of the things that we can do through our Global Health Research Programme is, again, to go back to within the capacity building that we're very clear about funding. How would you how would you fund those bridging programs to bring people in, particularly from, and I know that a good number of other groups recruit from their research delivery staff because they know that the people understand what it's like and they've got experience, but they want to make that jump. Will we invent the perfect program for every scenario? No. Will we try and fill as many gaps? In fact, what we're trying to do is not overcomplicate the capacity building, but to try and weave it in and make sure it's led from the ground rather than us sitting in London and deciding what it should look like.
Yeah.
And it's a question about being imaginative with those routes.
Yeah, presently, actually, the nurses who are working in clinical bedside, they are really interested into research. We have many training sessions for them. So, but there are no opportunities available to them to have research.
So I would reshape it as the importance of, for example, it might be letting a research team member know when there's a baby suitable for a research study, and that can be one step. It's what I call being research aware. And then being research active, where we have quite a lot of hybrid roles. So you may be 50% clinical and 50% research. And those are really strong and powerful. And if you've got leaders in your institution who back that as a model, both sides win. So it's good for recruitment, it's good for retention, it's good for the research delivery. Because even on your so-called clinical day, you'll spot an opportunity, and vice versa. Even as a researcher, it's easy for you to provide some sort of wraparound clinical care. So I think that, and then we have the research leaders, and there are many of those in the room. So I think it's about, there is no one size fits all for this. And in fact, even in the UK, this idea of should you take hybrid roles, should you take 90-10, 90%, 10% roles, it's much, much better to leave it up to what's right at a local level rather than us saying there is just one size to do this. But for example, it comes back to those bridges, which is how do you get from being full-time clinical into having exposure or some experience of research and then taking more of a part. But those zigzags in our lives, I went and did 2 years of clinical training. Well, I've often gone from clinical to academic, full-time academic, back into full-time clinical, back into joint posts, back into one or the other. And it's what we would call having a portfolio career, and that's often the case. I wouldn't swap it for anything. I wouldn't swap it for private. I wouldn't swap it for full-time NHS. It's what fires me up in the morning. But having some flexibility and creating those opportunities, I know, is key.
And it's hard when you start, because I think what I'm hearing from you is there aren't the opportunities, and what do we do? But you have people are in this room listening to research because they care about it, and you've got the academics coming in and giving funding, and then gradually it escalates. And I think people, as long as there's a culture that supports it, people then realise the benefits. You get good people in, you attract better staff, you attract more academics. Oh, they delivered the trial, let's go and use them in our next study. And the whole thing escalates. And then the hospital that we work at has 1,000 trials, and it's just embedded in our culture, and it makes our life easier. But for you guys, it'll be tough. But you're trailblazing, but you have to keep the pressure on. You have your seniors' support, and open the doors to the girls coming in asking for help. And it'll just gradually get better, but it'll be a flat line and then hopefully exponential.
Well, I'm Sita Shankar Naik. Grew up in the Nilgiris in Madras State, as it was called then, and went to Madras Medical College, and then left for the United States right after, and was very interested in brain injury in neonates. I did my fellowship in neonatology, and actually worked on the sonographic classification of intracranial hemorrhage in the 70s. And then I did some follow-up work of term infants with HIE. It was not a very big study, but what impressed me was that at 5 years of age, because I followed the kids, that half of them looked okay and the other half were just devastated. And that really, got my interest in term HIE. And the next, I think, major step in my career was when I became the co-PI and later the PI of the NICHD funded Neonatal Research Network, which is a collaboration of initially 7 institutions in the US, and then now is about 17. And we did clinical trials and observational studies. And the way you did the trials was you brought a proposal to the table, and if it went through a very rigorous review process, and if it was approved, then you did the research. And actually, the first trial I did was with the obstetricians. It was antenatal phenobarbital to prevent neonatal intracranial hemorrhage. It was what you would call a negative study. We were supposed to enroll 1,200 women, and we stopped at 800 because it was clear that this was a futile treatment. And what was interesting was that obstetricians at that time were giving antenatal phenobarbital. So after our trial came out, then the practice stopped. So, that was a major thing in my career. And when you talk about zigzags, the next thing I thought I would do was imaging of term infants with brain injury. And when I presented the proposal, one of my colleagues asked, why do you want to just do an observational study? You should do an interventional study. And so I, went back, reviewed the literature, and it so happened that there's a lot of preclinical literature of cooling animals after you create hypoxia ischemia, and you time the injury, and you cool the animal, and there was benefit. And this was across species, across both fetal models and neonatal models. And at the same time, the first adult trial of cooling for cardiac arrest had just come out. And, I thought, what the heck, I'll just call him and talk to him. So I called up this guy who was very nice to me, and he said to me, oh, yeah, I'm sure you could cool babies who are, with HIE, and how long do you want to cool them? And I said, well, 3 days based on the literature. But, he was extremely encouraging, and I presented that to the NICHD, and they said, well, you can't cool a baby for 3 days when nobody's done before. So, try on an animal model. And so one of my colleagues, Abbott Laptuk, he was working on piglet models. And so he cooled the piglets and showed it was safe. And then we went on and we did the first whole body cooling trial, and found it to be very beneficial. So the point you make about asking questions, because then the next question was, what about if we cool them for a longer period of time or deeper cooling, would it be more beneficial? And so we did, the next trial, and these were all published in JAMA and New England Journal. And I guess, and then we've done the preemie hypothermia trial that was just over. But the other point in my career and the other zigzag is when, Sudhin came to talk to me, and this was probably about 15, 17 years ago, and said, he wanted to do a cooling trial in India. And so we planned it and did the pilot in Kerala, and then subsequently did the Helix trial. So for me, that was, coming back, working in this country with all these colleagues sitting in this room, and giving back to the university that trained me, actually. And, medical training in India is very inexpensive. So when you compare it to college in the United States, so I really felt I have to give back. So that's, for me, that's been a long journey. The other part I will mention is people don't realize that I've done something else besides schooling. I did again, within the neonatal network, we did one of the longest studies looking at the impact of maternal lifestyle during pregnancy and the outcome on the neonate, outcome on the infant. Then we did childhood outcome, and then we did adolescent outcome. So we followed these children up to 16 years of age. So, that's something people don't know about me. But we published so many papers from that. And I think the database is still, which is open to the public, is being used, is one of the most accessed databases for PhD students. So that's the maternal lifestyle study. So anyway, I've had a long career, as you can see, and right now I'm at University of Texas in Austin, and what I do is faculty development and teaching. So, and the work I do with Imperial. So I think I've, doing what I wanted. Thank you.
Plan for some of the students to give the presentation.
Look, presentation is okay. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
It's okay, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
I
just go in.
Are we okay? Are we okay for time?
Just 4 o'clock.
I was going to just share quickly. I'm sorry, before Lucy. So Lucy's PhD, and I guess this is a good lesson for the early career researchers. There are lots of ups and downs, and Lucy doesn't know what I'm going to say now, but did a PhD on looking at antioxidants and their effect on preeclampsia, which was a really promising target at the time, and also did all the biomarker work, and that's why it kind of became such an expert in the biomarkers. But the first trial looked like it might have some important positives, although it was a secondary endpoint, and that's why. But then a whole bunch, everyone all over the world did masses of trials of antioxidants. Unfortunately, Lucy's next big trial proved it wasn't, before anyone else, wasn't a thing. So there are lots of negatives. And you need to be very suspicious of people who only have positives, I think. And lots of good things come out of the negatives. But, the lesson, I think, to you is, you got to be hard-nosed and keep going. But even now, I go through some people where I'll get grants rejected 6 times, and we've done this together even now, before we get it. But we keep going. We learn and we keep going. So you're going to get rejected more than us, and we get rejected all the time, but it doesn't mean you're not successful. And I think, and it's great to hear these different careers.
So I met, Sita 15 years back after she gave a talk in Pune when the first schooling trial was published in NIHR in 2005. So Sita came with the husband. Her husband always follows, where. And then we met. I was in a long queue of people waiting to meet this professor. So I just finished my training at that time, training in neonatology. And that really inspired me to do a PhD later on. And when we were coming, then we came in the same car, and Sita's husband was saying, very earlier on, they realized Sita was the high flyer. He was also an academic in pharmacology and so on. So he took the back seat looking after the kids, and Sita was but he used to follow to every conferences. And so I did the PhD after that, and we did a lot of, because at that time there was no infrastructure to do good clinical trials. So it took us almost 4 years to set a groundwork for doing a cooling trial. And we thought, it's worked really well in high countries, so the benefits will be huge if it's beneficial in LMIC. So that was a real motivation. And then we did this trial, 5 years, and then we found results exactly opposite of what we expected. It was causing more harm, increasing mortality. So after that, half of India is upset with us, but now we are trying to find out why that's the case. So when you find things which you didn't expect, you need to kind of explore deeper why that's the case, and that's how we started with the prevent study and so on. And just pass on.
Hi, I'm Pallavi. I'm a PhD student at Imperial. So I trained as a nurse in India and then went on to do my master's in public health. I've always been interested in research when studying from my undergrads. So, and I also like public health and wanted to have a career in research. So went on to public health. and subsequently worked in New Delhi and also the Nilgiris in community health and also global burden of disease study. So it was then when an opening came in the Prevent study for a project manager. And then I realized it was like the perfect opportunity for me to combine both my nursing training and also my research training during the public health. And after that, I applied for the NIHR Spark Award, where I worked on trying to explore the health systems aspect of newborn brain injury, because often HIE is approached from a very clinical, perspective. I thought, my training in public health could be of use, and so I wanted to do a PhD in that. So one of the main outcome of my NIHR Spark Award was to apply for the PhD fellowship, and I secured that position. And now I'm in my final year of my PhD. So I think, and yes, I'm looking into the health system aspect, and my next step is basically to use machine learning to predict HIE in the population that we are studying. And so this is kind of a really nice blend for me to use both my nursing skills and also research, pursue research. And this PhD was also a great opportunity for me to basically engage with many of the NIHR platforms for early career researchers. So again, the point where we were talking about building a platform where all the collaborators can get together and form further collaborations. The only suggestion I would add would be perhaps if we can have a platform which is also open to other institutions who are currently not part of an NIHR program, that would kind of help us, find new collaborators who are interested as well. Because currently we do have an NIHR Academy events where all of us get together, but it's again within the NIHR Academy. So it'll be good if we can have a much larger platform, but just a suggestion. Yeah, so that's my story, yeah.
I introduced myself as the outlier before. And honestly, very happy to be so. I feel I've got such an incredible learning experience since I've been with this group. But before that, like I said, I was working more at the grassroots level here, and my background was mostly engaging with both the structural as well as the intermediary determinants of health. And I was always more interested in the psychosocial side, so understanding the why. Why do people make certain decisions? Why do mothers make a decision to access or not access healthcare? And what are the factors that influence their decision? So this is what I was doing before I joined, and when an opportunity came up, it was Professor Arul who introduced me to Sudhin, and I ended up working with him, and he's been a ladder, I think, for so many of us. Along with Sudhin and Tira Lavender, who's also my supervisor. I applied for an NIHR pre-doctoral fellowship to develop as a qualitative researcher, and specifically looking at interpretive methodologies like phenomenology. And I'm now trying to work understanding the lived experiences of mothers and fathers who experience stillbirth and neonatal death, and how can we work with them to develop more contextually relevant support system. Because so this is also my PhD. What I'm seeing is there's an immense loss of agency that especially mothers undergo when engaging with healthcare systems, and with all the well intentions in trying to help people, there is some vulnerabilities and some marginalization which occur, which remains unidentified. So I'm trying to uncover that phenomenon. And the other side of my work is, again, like I said, I'm interested in behaviors. We see a lot of very high consent rates in trials in LMICs. And I tried asking that question, why? Why do people say yes? What do they understand, and what is the motivation behind? So we did a study after the Helix trial, trying to understand why were parents and what did they understand. And 4 years later,
where do they think they are now? And it was quite an interesting study, which everybody here really supported. I'm very thankful to that, all of everybody here. And we're trying to continue that work with the new trials, trying to build on the work that we did. Again, yes, like I said, I hope to continue doing more such work here.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Vaishak. I'm a pediatrician from the state of Kerala, the southernmost state in India. Regarding my career, I did my... Yes, Prof Sida and Dr. Sudhini is also from Kerala. Okay, so regarding my career, I started out at Calicut Medical College. I did my MBBS, and I was really passionate about child health, so I took pediatrics. And towards the end of my and during pediatrics, we had to do it's rather out of a compulsion than out of passion. We have to do a small research project and submit. So that was my at that time. I thought about which area I would like to explore. So I chose autism because it's on the rise recently, and I was always interested in neurology and neurobehavioral disorders. And when I was trying my exams, I got my first exposure, and I was, to be honest, I was really starstruck when I saw one of the prevent meetings. That's when I met Prof Sudhin and Dr. Onit. And I was starstruck. And, this is the first time that I'm seeing what research can do to, the health, and what difference it can make to the health of babies. And at the same time, the helix results were, out. And actually, it was a devastating result, because this is the disease that carries the most number one cause of morbidity and mortality in young babies. And it shut the door to the only possible therapeutic option. So that really inspired me to take up the PhD into finding an answer to why this therapy did not work. So over the course then of my PhD, I gathered skills to enhance my EEG reporting skills. And I'm using EEG to try and time the brain injury, which could provide an answer as to why the therapy did not work, and which can possibly help in further neuroprotective therapies along the way. And in between my PhD, I was also lucky enough to receive immense support from NIHR. I got 2 awards. One was the Presentation Training and Travel Award, which gave me access to many courses which enhanced my research skills, and the Short Placement for Research Collaboration Award as well. Which have equipped me with the skills to complete my PhD, without which I think I would not have reached this far. So that's regarding my job. Thank you.
Hello, I am Deepika. I am a second-year PhD student and doing my PhD on the area of parental involvement in care of sick neonates. So going to my academic background, I have done a BSc nursing, and after that I worked in one of the hospitals in Bangalore, that is in the oncology unit. So during that period, there was one NGO which came to our to our hospital, and they trained the nurses on educating the families. So that is the time which was like, which I noticed that there are many things which a nurse can do apart from the normal routine bedside works. So I got into the idea of doing a Master of Social Work, which has got a lot of health promotion programs and all. And after that, I got into the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences, and did qualitative research that is on mental health, stigma and discrimination. And it was very much aligned with the health as well as the social work background. And then it was like I was continuing to focus more on my academics and also to build my research skills. And that's how I found this opportunity of working as a project manager in the Prevent, and I entered the Prevent project. So during that journey, this NIHR studentship opportunity came, and I got selected into that. So during my entire journey, I would say that the exciting part was to do an interdisciplinary education path, because from nurse I got into social work. Then I got experience in public health research projects. So getting different exposures is very important to broaden our perspectives as a researcher. So that is the best thing I have got.
Hi, I am Rupsha, and I have completed my MBBS, and then after that I did my MD in public health. We call it community medicine here in India. So after that I have around 7 years of post qualification experience, mostly in research and teaching. So during this time, during my public health practice, I got interested in mental health. So even though we have mental health programs, but still it was not much of a policy priority, and especially the area of child and adolescent mental health, which is relatively unexplored. Around 2.5 years back, I got associated with the PREVENT study, where I was carrying out the quality monitoring and process evaluation, and also the qualitative aspects of how the intervention is delivered and how it is being accepted by the beneficiaries. During my association with Professor Sudhin, I was introduced to experts working in the area of early intervention. So this really aroused my interest, and I started exploring the concept of early intervention with the goal of improving behavioral outcomes among children. And specifically in the PREVENT study, I got to know more about HIE and brain injury, and then the question arose that how can we use early developmental interventions to improve behavioral outcomes in babies with brain injury. And because we know that behavioral outcomes during childhood is a predictor for mental health in adolescents and adults. So I started reading more about that, and then Professor Sudhin introduced me to Professor Nusrat, a psychiatrist working in University of Manchester, and I read about his pioneering work on the intervention called learning through play. So learning through play is one early intervention, and it focuses on parental involvement. And though the area of EI is very huge, I got interested more in the parenting interventions, because we do have some early intervention programs in India, but they are mostly institutional and they don't focus on familial involvement. So after reading it up, I saw that most parenting interventions are very high resource interventions, very resource intensive and not very suitable for India. But the LTP, the learning through play intervention, actually was pioneered in Pakistan. So seeing that it was feasible there, so right now I wanted to see whether it would be feasible and its applicability in India. And so with this background, I applied for the NIHR Spark Award, and it's going to give me immense support. Now for this, I am traveling to the UK, to London, to learn more about HIE and the long-term outcomes and the predictors, and how an early intervention will be able to improve outcomes, and then to University of Manchester, where I want to learn more about the delivery of the LTP intervention, its feasibility, its challenges, implementations, barriers, or facilitators, all of that. And so that later on, as a long-term goal, I want to use this. I want this to be the research topic for my PhD, which I'm planning to apply for next year. And there specifically, I would want to see the feasibility and usefulness of this intervention in the Indian context, specifically in babies with brain injury. So thank you.
So I'm Constance. I'm in the final year of my PhD doing gene expression work at Imperial. I did a biomedical science degree actually in 4 years because I didn't have any science background. I wanted to do politics initially, then I changed my mind. So in the final year of my undergrad degree, I did a project in a lab. It was a gene therapy project, and I thought it was really interesting. Trying to deliver missing enzyme directly crossing the blood-brain barrier into mice models, but I still was missing some direct effect on a population. So that's when I heard about translational medicine and moving radiotherapies from the bench to bedside. So I applied for the master's at Imperial in clinical research specialized in translational medicine. where actually I was able to do a research project during the 12 months of the master's, and I contacted Sweden, and I decided to learn transcriptomics as it's a big component of translational medicine. And then I wanted to pursue that for my PhD. So I've been looking at gene expression in the Helix data set and also comparing it to high-income countries. And we've been seeing some really interesting data where the expression profiles are completely different in settings. And I think it has some really good potential for neuroprotection and possibly some new diagnosis methods in the future.
Sounds like you got one or two research leaders of the future. Yeah. So what I was going to say, or ask Lucy, but I will give a go at saying what I think before she comes back, is I'm pretty confident you guys will be research leaders in the future. It's a big step from your doctorate to postdoc, and a really critical step, and it requires a different set of skills and approach. And it's like that lovely slide about what you really want to do, what people will fund, the sweet spot. But within that sweet spot, you have to say, what have I got access to that no one else has? What can I do that other people want to know? In other words, you've got to be like the best in the world in somewhere, because that's what's going to make you successful. And not everyone has those skills, but that's how you become a successful academic, because you've learnt the foundation skills, but then you have to go more of a doer to being a creator. And I think that is a really, really hard step. I mean, maybe I should ask these guys, what words of wisdom would you give them? And I also just want to say for everyone else, I'm a firm believer that research is for everyone and at many, many different levels. So we don't all have to be hot-headed students, who's successful in grant writing.
So when I'm giving advice to my research group, one of the things I say, which they find quite hard, is when you go from PhD, from doc to postdoc, try very hard not to do an extension of your PhD. So try and broaden your methodology and broaden your area, whilst you don't have to do a 180-degree turn. The reason is that as a future employer, you are more useful with a bit more breadth, not funneling down at that point. So I think, and it was really nice hearing, there is space in your career for more than one thing. And there's definitely space for more than one single methodology. So, for example, I've done diagnostic test accuracy studies as well as randomized controlled trials. They are both very useful. I've done pregnancy hypertension, but I've done some other maternal medicine. So when people are in the third year of their PhD, they kind of want to do their PhD part 2. And when someone says no, they're giving you good advice. So I think it's not what everyone says, by the way, but I think both personally and as a research group leader, it always works out better in the long run because you are broadening your horizons, you're not shutting them down. Did you say something similar when I was out?
I could add to that. I mean, my PhD has got nothing to do with what I'm doing now. My PhD was on postmortem MRI, nothing to do with HI. I did want to do HI research at that time, but there was no funding. So I just took whatever was available. But I think that has really helped subsequently, getting the knowledge about MRI.
And you also want more than one egg in your basket because opportunities change. And that's a great thing about clinical. I always say to my students when they're moving up, look around you and see what your opportunities are. And actually, you guys working in your environment with your skills will have so many unique opportunities, actually. And it's just a matter of seeing them because you have access to things that no one else does with your skills. So there's a huge amount of unique opportunities. And you say, well, I can do this and no one else can. Let me do it because that's what the funders will like. That's what the editors will like. And I think that's what you have to do.
The reason I think so highly of qualitative researchers is that I went and did some in my master's in education. and I learnt how hard it was to design well, deliver well, and write up well. So now I really rate the qual researchers I work with for having a skill that I've both tried, and it was brilliant, but also now collaborate with. So you are sort of acquiring pieces of your jigsaw, and you're making, to go back to what you were saying, you are making your space, and you make it by having not every single piece of the jigsaw exactly the same shape and size and picture.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something about the uniqueness, because you do have to have some confidence in yourself. When I, in 1982, when I joined the Neonatal Research Network, and the PIs sit around a table, and the, research nurses sit behind them. I mean, we had all that. And I looked around, and I realized I was the only person who was not, blonde-haired and blue-eyed. And then I mentioned the antenatal phenobarbital study. So I was told that I had to present it to the maternal fetal network of the NICHD. So I went to the presentation, and I walk into the room, and I look around the table, and I'm like, where are the women? There wasn't a single woman obstetrician in the room. It was all men. And I thought, oh my God. But, things have changed. So when you are unique, I think, you have to have confidence in that. Now, there was one thing I wanted to mention, and the other is that when you do a trial, there is really no negative trial. I don't use the word negative trial at all. In fact, the HEAL trial, which was just published, this is erythropoietin and cooling. The PI of the trial, she met Sudhin and me for dinner, and she said, I'm presenting this tomorrow. I'm going to be in tears. How am I going to present this negative trial? And I said, it's not negative. You've learned so much from it. And sure enough, this year at the PAS, they had a whole hallway of secondary studies that they published, right? So there is no negative trial. You really have to look at everything as a learning experience.
There is no such thing as positive findings or negative findings. They are all results. And the so-called negative, if that stops all the unnecessary next steps, that is why we cannot accept publication bias. Every study needs publishing, and every study, there's lessons learned. I couldn't agree with you more.
Can I just add, I love the confidence problem, just to help you guys, because I think it's quite a good anecdote, but I opened up one of the NIHR kind of whatever grant things recently, and I saw this very, very long list of rejected grants, which I'd obliterated from my mind from 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I don't know which site it was. And at the time, I felt terror. Every time someone rejected me, I took it personally. I thought I was hopeless. I thought this isn't going nowhere, and you got to pick yourself up and try again. And when you start, you have got no credibility, no one rates you. I now realize 25 years, I'm just ahead of my time, right? And you look at the data, you say, oh, someone else has done that now. I wish I'd stuck with it a bit more. So the confidence issue, you got to have self-belief without being arrogant and inappropriate, but don't worry about being rejected. I love Lucy's kind of, we all get rejected. You will get rejected more than us, and it'll get better. You got to stick with it.
Thank you so much. It's been an honour and a privilege to be here with all of you. I always learn and take away lots of things, both from your journeys and also your experiences. So really lovely to be here, and thank you for your generosity and sharing so much. And I just think, don't underestimate what you've all got as the network. You're here, you've landed, you're doing the work, you're doing the important work, and you're part of this community. You can shape it too. You don't need to ask for permission. So I really look forward to seeing, I think it's so powerful what you're doing here. And I really look forward to seeing the results next year and the year after and 5 years with that legacy. So thank you.